We are going to talk about a lot of information today: STAR, STAR modified, STAR alternate, STAR lat or the STAR L, Spanish STAR, as well as tax, tax accommodated, tax M. We still have all those, for the high school anyway, the 9th or 10th and 11th grade exit level kiddos, we still have tax, tax accommodated, tax M, and then we still have TELPAS for our LEP students. Just an overview of significant changes. First of all, the STAR, you understand, we have STAR and STAR EOC. When we just talk straight up STAR, most of the time we're referring to the 3 through 8. The 3 through 8 STAR, same test, same subject areas that we've had in years past. We still have STAR Spanish for those students that the LPAC committee determines that that's the appropriate test. And it's still just grades 3, 4, and 5. No further than that. We have the STAR L, which will have the linguistic accommodations for kids 3 through 8. But there are also some STAR linguistic accommodations for EOC as well. But understand that those tests, STAR L and Spanish, are determined by the LPAC committee. So as we talk about ways that you communicate and verify who's taking what test, most of you are members of your LPAC committee at your campus. If not, put that down as one of the first things you need to do when you get back to school. Who is your LPAC chair? If you can't track that person down, Becky Hernandez or Margaret Rafter will be glad to help you out and help you to identify that person, but also how you can keep up with who those students are and what tests that they take on those particular days. Because there's a lot of standard setting going on, and you all know this, we know that we're not going to have scores back as we normally have in the past. We're going to get raw scores back, but notice for this first group of tests, we're going to get raw scores in April or May. The standard setting will not take place. They'll pull some educator groups together, and those standard settings will not take place until the fall. They're saying October of 2012 that standards may be set, and then we'll start getting the reports back, actually the reports from the state in January and or February. So we're looking a long ways from now before we get actual reports with scores and knowing where the ratings are for these kids. That's going to be 10 months after they actually test. So keep that in mind for those three groups. For STAR EOC and STAR L, the standard setting will begin in February of this year. We've been field testing. Those of you that have been in high school know we've been field testing EOC tests for the last couple of years. So they have the data. There are groups, educator groups, meeting now to set scores. Now, most likely there's going to be a phase-in. They're going to have, like they did when we went from TOS to TAX, there'll be a phase-in over 1 or 2 years until they actually get the passing score set. So we'll have a, one standard error, 1 SEM, 2 SEM as we move into what is the appropriate score. So again, we'll have standard setting in February. We'll get results back in June. And it looks like June 8th is what's on our calendar, so that's what we're going to hold our breath and hope they do come in by then. That will be the paper results. So high school folks, the online reports will probably be in about a week to 10 days earlier, as we're used to. More standard setting activities. For the STAR Modified. STAR Modified, we'll get raw scores in June, the standard setting in the fall, and again, results with applied standards won't happen until January or February of 2013, so a year away. STAR Alternate, even though that window has opened, we're doing the STAR Alternate. This is the test that you all have very little to do with, and I know Suzanne Russell will talk more about it in a few minutes. But this is for that small group. I think this year we have 77, Suzanne, does that sound about right? District-wide, we have about 77 students that meet the requirements, participation requirements for this test. This is the one that's not a paper pencil test. It's completely done with the teacher. The teacher develops the activities. The essence statements are set by the state. It's a very rigorous test. But this test, even though the window opened January 9th, they've got until April 20th. I don't have the date right to my mind right now. But even though they're doing that test right now, we still will not have the passing score, the standard set, until later as with the other tests. So it'll be January before we know what those scores look like. I will say too with a STAR Alt, this is the only test that encompasses all grade levels. We're not doing a phase-in with like having TAKS at 10 and 11 as we are with the other students. It's STAR Alt all the way across the board, 3 through 11, 12, depending on the grade level. Excuse me. Okay, the overview of the significant changes. This is not new. Hopefully elementary schools and junior highs, you know that the SSI, the Student Success Initiative, is kind of on hold for this year. Only in the respect that we don't have test results to use to determine whether kids are going to promote to the next grade level. We don't have multiple tests. There's just one test. It's the one that they will take in April, May, depending on the subject area, but we will have one test. There won't be retest opportunities because we won't have passing standards. We won't know whether they passed or not until October. So campuses are going to have to use other methods to determine whether 5th and 8th graders need to be retained or promoted. And curriculum specialists and principals, they've already been discussing what other avenues they're going to look at as far as promotion and retention decisions for those kids. But no SSI as far as testing is concerned. Again, the standards won't be set until fall, so there's no way to determine whether kids have passed or have been successful on the test or not. Other significant changes. For students receiving special ed, the accommodated forms of test are no longer available, and that is because the format changes on the STAR test itself are comparable to what TAKS accommodated was last year. More white space, Verdana font, but things like that that made the TAKS accommodated test a different test than a TAKS. That is what they've already done with the STAR. That's why there's not a STAR accommodated. So you've got STAR, which regular or general ed students and special ed students will take, but special ed students will take that test with accommodations. So we'll address that later on today. But again, STAR test is already being modified to fit a format similar to what TAKS accommodated was last year. The STAR M, STAR Alt assessments, again, those students are available for those that meet the participation requirements. When Suzanne Russell visits with you all, she's going to show you that the state has developed actually 2 forms, one for STAR Alt, a 2-page form, and one for STAR M that is very specific. There is a checklist of things that the students have to meet in order to qualify for that test. They don't get on a STAR M or a STAR Alt test because they can't pass the test that's prior to. Because they don't pass a STAR test, that's not why we put them on a STAR M. They have to meet the participation requirements. And the state now wants those forms filled out and kept as documentation on the campus. So be kind of cracking down on that to make sure we're not giving that test or not assigning that test just because we want students to pass. Keeping on with more significant changes. STAR assessments for English language learners. Becky's got a large set of slides to cover with you in a few minutes, but I will say a couple of the highlights of the changes. First of all, there are no exemptions this year. In years past with TAKS, depending on when the students enrolled and when they first entered a U.S. public school, sometimes some kids were exempt from taking tests. That is, there are no exemptions. If they come in the day before, if they come from a foreign country and enroll the day before test starts, they are not exempt from the test. Okay, now there may be some kids that just can't take the test on that day. We'll talk about how we'll handle those individual situations. But no one is exempt. There's not going to be an X score code for exempting a student on a test anymore. The STAR L is the linguistically accommodated English version. And again, it's for kids who meet the requirements, and the participation requirements will be set by the LPAC. That committee at the campus will determine who, not just who is eligible for receiving the linguistic accommodations in the L test, but they will also determine which accommodations the kids will be eligible to use on the test. And just like a special ed student, if they have linguistic accommodations assigned, the teacher needs to be using them on a regular basis, daily. They can't just pull them out on the day of the test and think the student's going to know what to do. So to be successful, to have the best chance to pass and do well on the test day, whatever the LPAC has determined are the linguistic accommodations a student needs, the student needs to be using on a regular basis. I think you're going to hear that over and over again, routinely, independently, regularly. And that's the key. And your teachers need to be able to use that and demonstrate that they're doing that in the classroom as well. The STAR Spanish, as we've mentioned, it's available for just grades 3, 4, and 5. And who decides the participation requirements, if they're met or not? It will be the LPAC. ELLs not eligible for STAR L or STAR Spanish still may get some linguistic accommodations. Okay, and there's also some accommodations that J. Bill will visit with you on, and that's some of the optional ones, materials and practices that might make it a little bit more advantageous for the student in the classroom. More significant changes. Scheduling of the test sessions. The 4-hour time limit. We're going to talk at length about that in a few minutes. We've got the 4-hour time limit policy. It's an easy 1.5-page template. You've got a copy of it in your packet. You've got a couple of red sheets of paper, and in between that you've got 4 very important documents. I've sent them to you as links through emails. If you have not started making copies of those and sharing them with your staff, give them in little increments, a little bit at a time. Start letting them know. If you can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes at a faculty meeting or a PLC meeting and just start presenting increments of this information now instead of overwhelming them all together when it's time to start training in February, it will help immensely. Plus, they will have an opportunity to start asking questions about these new procedures. And I think if we have an unusual number of testing irregularities, this is probably going to be the area. And by saying that, I'm hoping that we're all cognizant and paying close attention and helping our teachers to understand that there's 4 hours available for testing. 4 hours including the bubble time. 4 hours from the time that they say you may start your test. If there's no more questions, there's a 4-hour. And it's for everyone. It's STAR M, it's STAR L, it's the STAR with accommodations. Now if an accommodation is extended time, then they can be within the school day, but that's only going to be determined by the ARD committee or the 504 committee or the committee who makes decisions like the committee that reviews dyslexic students. But not only is it going to have to be determined by those committees, it's going to be something that the student uses routinely and regularly. If not, we're not just doing it on test day. We can't just do it on test day. So again, there's a 4-hour time limit. We're going to take extra precaution to make sure everyone is monitoring that within your classrooms. Teachers, no more covering clocks, not even at the 3rd grade, because even 3rd grade, 4-hour time limit. And they've got to get their bubbles done then as well. So no clocks covered, they can have watches, and we're going to develop some procedures that I'm going to request when we work on the PowerPoint that you'll deliver to your campuses. We're going to have some of our own independent procedures in place where they're going to publicly, where somebody who walks by the hallway or walks by the classroom can see this is the start time on a butcher paper or on the chalkboard or whiteboard, but where anyone who walks by the room can see what the start time was, when they've notified the students that there's 1 hour left, when they've notified the student when there's 2 hours left, 3 hours, and then that 4th hour every 15 minutes, and then the stop time. We just don't want anyone going home to mom or dad or anyone saying, my child didn't get the full 4 hours. Or the child in the classroom next to us, they got 4.5 hours, or they got to bubble after the 4-hour clock limit. We're not having any of that. So we've got to make sure our teachers understand, and if we can start sharing some of this information with them now and not let that be the focus of our training. I mean, this is going to be information they already understand completely. If we can introduce some of this information, it will make your training time with your teachers go a whole lot smoother. Extra time, extra day. Again, those would be accommodations that have to be approved ahead of time by the 504 committee, and it's got to be in the IEP. If it's a special ed group, it's got to be in the IEP. If it's the ARD that makes that decision. But once again, not just is it going to have to be decided by a committee that knows the student and makes decisions for that student, but used regularly in the classroom. This is going to stop a lot of the teachers, and bless your heart, testing coordinators. I know a week before testing, you've got teachers saying, this student just needs extra time, or this student needs to have an individual administration. You have now, not just, I mean, it's a requirement. They have to now show that they've been doing it on a regular basis. They can't come to you the week before and say, this student has to be by themselves, and then you've got to go scraping around looking for another test administrator or a classroom or place to test somebody. So ongoing, we've got 8 weeks before the first rounds of testing. The teachers, we've got to be using the accommodations now. There's one other thing, and we'll talk more about the time again, but I will say the testing should end by the close of the regular school day. If you have we'll have campuses that may start sessions after lunch for students, especially if you haven't ended any, or if you're going to have a different type of EOC class, EOC test. There will be times where you may have separate sessions starting afterwards. We can test beyond the school day, as long as it's still within that 4 hours, okay? So there may be some, if you have students that have not ended a test session and you've got somebody who's come in late after lunch, but you know good and well that there's not been any type of interaction between other classmates for a test, there'll be opportunities for you to start a class maybe or a test right after lunch. And as long as it ends close to the end of the school day, we're going to be in good shape. All right, makeup testing, this is different. All grades, all subjects. Not just AYP grades and subjects anymore. So everybody can have a makeup test. The makeup testing, usually they'll have, like we've had in the past, we'll have the Friday afterwards, but they're a lot more flexible with the makeup testing schedule than they've ever been before. So we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but just know makeup testing involves everyone now, every grade level, every subject area. All right, another big, huge change, the training of your testing personnel. We went from trainings to multiple manuals, multiple trainings, multiple oaths. Scratch all that. We're back to one training and one oath, and they sign the oath after the training. But your training is going to have to encompass both your security information as well as test information, all the ins and outs. That's what I'm saying. If you start now telling them some of the new particulars about the timing and use of some of the accommodations, if they know now, you can save a lot of your time, a lot of your training. If you can document, as you send an email out or as you take 10 minutes on during a PLC or a teacher's meeting to share some of the information on these new changes, you can save some of that time when you meet with your staff, but you're only going to have one training. You can have additional ones. Now, if you've got campuses or you've got teachers that you know are brand new to testing and have lots of questions, if you have teachers that are routinely involved in testing miscues, you may need to have some additional security training. The state still has the 3 training modules. Those are still available. They're still recommended by the state, and they're also going to be recommended that you all use those as an additional. I strongly recommend them for your new people that have not been involved in Texas state testing before. But the modules can be viewed individually, and they can produce their own certificate, or they can be shown as a group where you have a sign-in sheet. They're well done. They've been tweaked, so TAX is removed and STAR is now in there. So the language reflects the STAR testing and no more TAX. So they have been updated. And they're still about 20 minutes apiece. But the modules on the training on handling secure materials and monitoring students, all 3 of them are still there. Something different this year, I am going to develop a PowerPoint. We've done it in the last couple of years. I've shared PowerPoints. I'm going to make a PowerPoint that you're going to have to use. Now, if you want to create, add to, you just can't delete. I will try to keep it to about 100 slides. It won't be 220, maybe even less, but just know that there are some things that as a district we want to make sure that you have covered with your staff. So there will be a PowerPoint. It will look similar to this. The information that they don't need to, your teachers aren't as involved with, things that are more the housekeeping things that you have to take care of, the organizational things, won't be on the slides, but everything with test administration, the major changes, and security we'll make sure we have on the PowerPoint. But we're going to have that. We'll get that out to you. Probably not for a couple of weeks. Our manuals are not due. The test administrators' manuals are not due here until February 24th. They'll probably be posted online the week before, an electronic version. You can't do your training with your staff until they have the manuals in their hands. So just know there's not a rush to go back and turn this around right away. I'll get the PowerPoint to you within 2 weeks, and then just know you have time to get used to, get familiar with it, ask questions about it, tweak it, add to it, and then if you want to start planning with your building principal Do you want an hour or two after school? Do you want to do, you know, at a time where they come in on their own? Just make sure that every staff member that's going to be involved in training sees the PowerPoint, and you have documented that they've signed in and they've viewed the PowerPoint that we put together for you all, okay? Optional test administrator procedures. Oh, let me back up. On the training, I will say too, after they finish the training, they sign the oath and they're done. You don't have to collect an oath for every test administration. You have one oath to keep up with for the entire year. I mean, that ought to just, I mean, I can see a lot of you shaking your heads, just knowing you're not going to have all those oaths each time we turn on. You keep the oaths and you hold on to them until the last training has taken place, or last testing session has taken place at that, for the year, and then you'll turn them in. But you'll have oaths that you just have to have signed one time. And the orals will be a little bit different. We'll show you those in a few minutes, but there is a section on the folks that are going to be seeing or viewing confidential information or secure information on the test itself. They will have to have a second signature. Okay, optional test administration materials and procedures. We have a lot of things now, and that's also one of the handouts that you have between the two red sheets. There's, I think, 3 pages, is that right, Karen? 2.5 pages worth of optimal or optional materials and procedures. These are things that the state has determined don't compromise the integrity of a test, and all students can use them. All students can use them, but all students don't have to use them. That's the key. Just because they're available, a lot of your test administrators will have students come into their room on test day that they haven't seen or haven't worked with on a regular basis. Your test administrator can't say, here's everybody's Sharpie marker or highlighter, excuse me. They can't pass everybody out a place marker. The material has to be available and students can come and get it. One of the things that's different, where before we've handed highlighters to students, you can't give it to them anymore. They have to request, or they have to, I mean, you can't give them a strategy. It's got to be student initiated. So all these optimal things that are listed, highlighters, place markers, buffers to you know, drown out noise, surrounding noise, all those things are student requested. Students have to know, they have to self-advocate, they have to go and get what they know they need. But the test administrator can't say, oh, here you go, you need this. Not anymore, okay? So optimal practices, procedures, materials, you've got the handout, that's another one. Get it into the hands of your teachers. If there's things on there that teachers know that will make a difference for some students, it may be a matter of where they sit in the classroom, away from the door, close to the teacher's desk. But those types of things, teachers now need to be working and make sure the students know and the students understand. And if a teacher's not going to be teaching or testing their student, that needs to be communicated to you, the campus test coordinator. So you're going to have to keep that line of communication open with all your teachers. If there's optional materials and practices that teachers know have helped students, they've got to communicate that. You're not in every classroom to know that. Okay, I think I just moved that up, didn't I? All right, another significant change, the testing materials. Elementary schools, this is a big one, and I hope your teachers, your 3rd grade teachers, have been working with students on bubbling. But on the positive side, as far as handling materials, it's going to be wonderful. Not a scoreable test booklet they have to deal with. You will have an answer document for 3rd grade, just as you have had in the past with 4th, 5th, and 6th. So no more secure, scoreable test booklets. 3rd graders have to put their answers on their answer document. Now, one thing that's going to be kind of tricky too for 3rd graders is just to make sure that students know those answers, those bubbles have to be filled out before that clock. But when, you know, they can't, as in years past, a lot of times teachers have asked students to put their answer documents away and answer everything in their book and then transfer. If students are so bent on doing that and they don't have time, that whole issue of transcribing, we have basic and complex transcribing that are now on the pyramid. students have to put their answers on their answer document, and they have to do it in that 4-hour time period. So again, teachers need to be practicing that. Students need to know how to bubble, and look at strategies and techniques that they stay on track, whether it's bubbling the question as soon as they answer it, but there's got to be some strategies working right now where students are able to keep up with what they're doing are keeping up with their answers and answer documents, or the bubbles. Okay, EOC folks, I've talked to the elementary, but EOC, you're going to have a separate answer document for every subject area. The exception would be the EOC ELA 1, 2, and 3, or the English 1, 2, and 3, that you have actually 2 tests. You'll have 2 books, but 1 answer document. There's just a place to put the 2 book numbers at the top. What I don't have to show you is right now are a lot of the answer documents. There are some of them that have been posted online. Same thing with the oath. We can see some of the ideas that they have, that they're presenting some parts of the answer document. We don't have the whole ones that we can actually share right now. So separate answer documents for each EOC subject area. For all the EOC tests, for all the M, we will have pre-code labels. We won't have pre-code answer documents like you've had in the past with high school tax and tax accommodated. You got to have an electronic version handy, because all of the extra information that they would put, whether it had to do with the calendar or some of the timing or just procedural things, they're not written, spelled out. They are on links on the TEA website. And actually it's under the District Campus Coordinator Manual. There are all the links that we had before that were printed in the document are now as links on the TEA website. We'll have some samples of the covers in a few minutes on the actual administrator manuals, but you can see how they're going to be clustered in the future. Grade 3 through 5, 1 manual, and that's for any star, whether it's LAT, modified, all 1 manual. Same thing with a 6 through 8 and EOC. The other thing that's important is, notice that bottom line, 1 manual all year long. Don't let them throw it away. Now they'll use the same manual over and over again, and you're only going to get 1 shipment in a manual. So if they start throwing it away, they're going to be looking to print some off of the website. We'll have some extras, but I'm going to encourage you all to make sure teachers know, don't chunk the manual. They'll use it over and over again. Some of you in the past have a practice where you've collected them anyway. But again, 1 manual, they'll use it all year long for all administrations that year. More significant changes. Gosh, we'll get through this part here. 4th and 7th grade writing in the English 1, 2, and 3 is going to, and I know the ELA, I know Misty Spear has been working with teachers, but the tests are so different. The organization, actual design, the use of the dictionary from 6th grade on up, that's some mandatory. Which reminds me, you also have, between the red sheets, a dictionary, the new revised dictionary policy. 6th grade on up, 7th grade on up, students have to have a dictionary. They have to have one for the writing, the reading, the ELA test. So that's a requirement now, not an option. So dictionaries have to be present. If you haven't been purchasing those, we need to get those. They list the types of dictionaries that need to be available. Test designs are different. Time limits still apply. Big change, notice the red, and we'll say it a couple more times. No duplication. In the years past, we've been able to make copies of the short answer, open-ended, the essays, compositions. We've been able to make copies. No copying this year. A lot of it's because we have a lot of the items are field tested. Prompts are field tested in some cases, and we just can't have copies if they're going to, if they're still trying to decide whether they're valid or not. So no copying of any of the ELA material this year. 4th grade specific, elementary folks, this one's for you. Notice that you're going to have, this is not new, some of you piloted or did the field testing last year, but it is a 2-day test. The way the 4th grade design or the organization of the test, notice that you've got half of the multiple choice test questions and a composition on 1 day. Day 2, the second half of the multiple choice questions, and a composition. I will go ahead and say too, they made it a point to stress last week at our training that there's going to be a set place on that answer document for the composition to be written. It'll say you've got composition 1, composition 2. They've got to make sure they can't flip-flop. They've got to write it where it's identified. So if it's day 1, composition 1, that's where it has to be written. Okay. Field testing, again, both days have multiple choice questions that are going to be field tested. They're embedded. And then there's a mini, every 3 years they're going to have a mini test to try out some prompts. So what did they say last week? 2014, I think, is the first year that they'll do one of these mini standalone field tests to try out some prompts. All right, junior high folks, your assessment organization for the writing is a little bit different. You've got all of your multiple choice questions and the first composition on day 1. All multiple choice and first composition on day 1. On day 2, you have the second and third composition. Junior high folks, 7th graders need to understand that they can write the compositions in any order they want, but they've got to write them in the correct spots. Okay? So if they want to do composition 3 first, they like that prompt, they want to write that one first, great. But you got to write it where the third composition is located on the answer document. And because both, there's field testing taking place on both the multiple choice and the compositions, another reason why we're not doing any type of copying of the short answer and open-ended questions and compositions. All right, English, high school folks, your turn. The reading and writing is assessed separately. You've got a writing component on day 1, reading on day 2, 1 answer document, 2 different test booklets, 2 different numbers. The scores are reported differently for the reading and writing. In the past, if a student passed or failed their ELA test on their tax exit test, they had to retake it. A little bit different with EOC because reading and writing are scored separately and tested separately. They also, if a student does not score high enough on a writing test and they do fine on the reading, it's just the writing component that they have to retest or try to get the higher score on. So again, a little bit different way to look at the EOC test versus the tax test that we've had in the past. And again, I've got it written down there. The students only retest on the component that they fail, and then both reading and writing field tests are embedded. Once again, justifying why we're not making any copies. And I really think, did any of you have your teachers make the copies, or were you all doing the copying of the answer documents? Okay, so as long as I'm communicating with the ones that did the copying, I don't think teachers in the past have had an issue with that. But they may be asking you, you know, where are my compositions and when can we read them? Just say it won't be happening this year. All right, more significant changes, 2-day design. The key test administration issues, we've already talked about the grades 4 and 7 writing, 1 test booklet with each day, but on the 4 and 7, just like we have multiple subject books with tax, they just will be sealed. On day 1, 4 and 7th graders need to make sure they break open seal 1 and not seal 2. So they'll be clearly marked which one's which, day 1, day 2, but they'll work on 1 answer document. All right, we've already mentioned this about the EOC, but they'll have 2 booklets, 1 answer document. There'll be allowable space to write their compositions and short answers, and this is also something they mentioned, that there will be a box for the compositions to be written in with a certain number of lines. What the state will read will be what's in the box only. But they're not going to, they will count the bottom of the box as an additional line, if that makes sense. So if you've got 9 lines to write in a box for a composition, but the 9 lines are in a box, that bottom line will be graded as well. So something else, just one of the little pieces of information to pass out to the teachers. New dictionary policy, you have a handout, a 1-pager in your templates there that can be shared with your teachers on the dictionary policy. I trust Misty's already been communicating that with all of the English language arts teachers and making sure that we have enough dictionaries at the campuses for students to use. 4-hour time limit, we've already talked about that, and once again, that time limit policy If there's one that's going to get us, I said that earlier, this one may be it. Teachers have got to take it seriously and be thinking in your minds right now. I'm going to suggest, like I said, the whiteboard, the chalkboard or butcher paper that's big enough that someone doesn't have to walk in the classroom to see the time limit. They can walk by the door and know that it's being communicated to the kids. If you have another idea, send it. We'll share it with everybody else, but we just want to make sure there's no questions about that time limit issue. And the no duplication or photocopying of any of the compositions and short answers. More significant changes. How about this? Are we enjoying STAR? I mean, a lot of this, I'm hoping you all have been keeping up. Maybe not reading those lengthy emails the minute I send them, but at least when you've got some downtime that you're catching up with some of the reading and going back and checking the TEA websites with the links that I'm sharing with you. But there are some changes with the math and science having to do with reference material, their workspace, and calculators. Let's start with the reference materials first. Reference materials is a little bit different. You're not going to have to keep up with individual cardstock charts and periodic tables and things like that anymore. Those reference materials are now going to be embedded. They're going to be in the test booklet, and they're going to be on perforated paper where the kids can tear them out. So all of the reference material for math and science, the conversions, the periodic tables, all these constants that they need are actually in the book. Okay, so you get a book and that's it, a book and an answer document. They're going to be used for grades 3 through 8 math, 8 science, algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, chemistry, physics. They're not going to be used in grade 5 science or biology. We'll talk about that more in just a few minutes. But these items that will be in the books for that specific test can be torn out and used by the students. There'll be scratch paper they can tear out. Kids can even use, and that's one of those optional practices and for materials and things, they can actually have scratch paper where we could never let them have it before. They can have it, it just has to be shredded afterwards. But they'll have what they're going to do in the book design itself because of the more white space. It's supposed to allow for more working around, like math problems and things. Students should be able to work some of the problems in their book. Should have enough white space in there to take care of their calculations ahead of time. For online testing, there will be pop-up windows that will allow for some of these things that will be in the perforated forms in the hard books or the paper books, but they will be on the online as well. They also, some of these things right now can be printed off the TEA website. So there are already some of these conversion tables, periodic tables, things that are going to be used as reference materials for math and science are on the TEA website and can be printed ahead of time. It's not a secret. I mean, the TEA website's public anyway. You don't need a secure password. Kids can access this and start getting familiar with it now. The workspace for math and science. Notice that there's some particulars about that this year. The workspace, the paper test will have additional blank space that will allow for working problems on for the test questions themselves. They can make notes, they can make calculations on the paper that they have there. The online test will also have some tools that they can make notes, and really this will apply more for the TELPUS, and we have some online testings that will field test for EOC, but right now we don't have the capability to actually institute online testing we don't have enough that we can do all the testings in one day, so the online testing for our districts is going to be limited right now. Math test, notice there's graph paper, and there's a list of the types of graph paper that can be used in addition to. They have a list in the manual that will tell you what kind of paper the students can have additional as they're working through their problems. But these too can be torn out and used used with they don't have to keep them in their book. They can take them out, but they have to be shredded afterwards. You don't turn those back in. All of this extra material that they might take out to use, all their reference material, will be shredded afterwards. We won't turn it back into this state. Campuses can, as I mentioned on the last one, they can print any of the items that are already on the TEA website available for students that they're going to be able to see, take a look at ahead of time. So let your math teachers or science teachers know that they can start exposing kids to these now. The more that they see before test day, the more familiar, the more comfortable they're going to be on test day. Calculators for math and science. Graphing calculators must be provided to each student taking Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. That's not new, and we've had that for the exit level, the 10th grade math test. We've had the graphing calculators. A scientific or graphing calculator, one or the other, has to be provided to students taking the EOC chemistry or physics test. Those have to be available. The calculator must be available for every 5 students taking a biology test. Okay, and it doesn't have to be a graphing calculator, but a calculator has to be available for every 5 students. If they're using the 4-function, just the basic calculator, you don't have to worry about clearing or anything, so that's not an issue. But on these others where we're having graphing calculators available, kids can even bring their own, but you, as the test administrator, they have to assure they've been cleared, whether they put a sticky tab, something to identify that they've cleared the calculator before the student has used it. So they know that they're coming in with a calculator that has no type of memory that might assist them or aid them in the testing. A calculator must not be provided for students who are taking grades 3 through 8 assessments unless their ARD committee has determined that this is something that they need for use. ARD committee, and in some cases 504. So again, there's a committee that has to determine whether this is an accommodation a student not just needs to be successful, but needs to be able to function on the test day.